I was like 6 months out. Sorry. Like, and then I isn't it today or like
Yeah.
my own name? Because it's yesterday. No, it's December.
Oh, no. And then
Yeah. About my. I will make it on there.
yeah, they was.
At this.
And that was not something
Yeah.
she wanted.
I think she said that she wants to just sell it. And it's not.
I was just looking to see. Yeah, what it was.
You doing, sir?
So we were talking to someone, so I said, I'm gonna wait and I'll get my turn to just hang on.
Are you?
I'm always talking, just. I mean, good. You know, so.
Let's see.
Yeah.
You're coming.
Right, I'll be glad to come after that. Yeah, I like to see. My grandkids do a park that has nursery rhymes and that there. And I go, well, who's that? You know, they're just, yeah, so they're happy ready and. Yeah, so I never get a book and make sure she good grandma. Yeah. Well, that's what it was hard. Where the people are thinking, yeah, because the bazaar is here next week. And I'm ready to set it.
I just don't, I'm not sure. And then I have for her, but I don't know, I just say, yeah.
Take care of them. All right, she's section 182. And then I see.
Thank you. Do you have my Okay.
You got that?
I tell you what, though, I mean, it's just a pain. Well, actually, they're kind of cool. You're surprised, I'll tell you what, you don't want to I end up with a bag that was supposed to be checked on. How does that other than, and a full thing of their pepper spray. And those people, and they were like, they gave me some kind of citation. I'm sitting there thinking, as they're pulling this stuff out, and I'm realizing. He's pulling out the taser. He's shaking his head. He pulls out the weapon. He's shaking his head. He pulls out the pepper
Morning. How are you? Good, how are you? I don't like living where I just get out.
Good morning. Do we have any announcements or prayer requests before we get started? Yes.
My friend Kathy went and had a biopsy done, and so they're waiting for the results of that to see what it is for positively sure. They told her cancer, but anyway.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, if not. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for this day that you've given us. We thank you for this time that we can come together to study from your word. We ask that you bless our time together, that we would be able to learn from your word. Thank you so much for giving it to us and keeping it for us. We pray that you would help us as we study to have right understanding. Help us to take your words into our heart and mind, that it becomes a part of the way that we think, that we may think about things in the way that you do. We may use your word to guide our lives. We ask that you'd help us all to walk in a way that is pleasing to you. We ask that you would be with those that are going through various difficulties. Ask that you be with Candy's friend and the tests that she's having. Pray that for the best outcome for her. Pray for the others that are on our mind, such as Lee and his cancer, Di and her upcoming surgery, and others that I'm not thinking of. That we pray that you would care for each one of them. We ask that you would be with the leaders of our country. Please help them to seek you, to seek to do what is right. We ask that you would help us with the things that we do, that we would do them well and honor you in everything that we do. We thank you so much for all the blessings that we have in Jesus. We again ask that you would bless our time of study this morning. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Okay, we're in Jeremiah chapter 3. Found this to be kind of a challenging chapter to study and try to understand it, and then to be able to talk about it. And I think I'll do this a little bit different. I had written through these things, kind of the stuff that I took away after studying it. I'm going to read that first, just to look at this, what's here in Jeremiah chapter 3. And you have, of course, God's judgment, and we know the captivity that's coming, but we see this idea of God putting them away, as like in divorcing a wife, that they've dealt with God treacherously, as a wife who leaves her husband for another. And here at the beginning, he makes this analogy with husband and wife, and points out in the law that a husband can't take back a wife that he's put away, who has become another's wife. But God has been calling them back. He has been, and he continues to call back. He will forgive and heal. But again, that idea of putting them away, there's a point where they are too far gone. And it's, I think, the idea as a nation, as opposed to the nation as a whole, this idea of the nation as God's wife, that's gone back. But there will be a remnant. There will be the individuals. He's seeking those hearts to return to him still, even though this putting away is happening. There's, God knows what's happening, and there's not a response, not a wholehearted response of the nation to turn back to him. So this, the judgment is going to happen. But a remnant will return to him. There will be a new covenant. The nations will join those of the remnant from Israel, and then there will be this people that will be faithful to God. So that's kind of my summary of the meaning here in Jeremiah chapter 3. And now let's go and just read the chapter. And of course, this is continuing from chapter 2. It's kind of a change here, but it is continuing with the thoughts of chapter 2. They say, if a man put away his wife, and she go from him, and become another man's, shall he return unto her again? Shall not that land be greatly polluted? But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers. Yet return again to me, saith the Lord. Lift up thine eyes unto the high places, and see, where hast thou not been lying with? In the ways hast thou sat for them, as the Arabian in the wilderness, and thou hast polluted the land with thy whoredoms, and with thy wickedness. Therefore the showers have been withholden, and there hath been no latter rain, and thou hast a whore's forehead, and thou refusest to be ashamed. Wilt thou not from this time cry unto me, My Father, thou art the guide of my youth? Will he reserve his anger forever? Will he keep it to the end? Behold, thou hast spoken and done evil things as thou couldst. The Lord said also unto me, In the days of Josiah the king, Hast thou seen that which backsliding Israel hath done? She is gone up upon every high mountain, and under every green tree, and there hath played the harlot. And I said, after she had gone all these things, Turn thou unto me. But she returned not, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away, and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. And it came to pass, through the likeness of her whoredom, that she defiled the land, and committed adultery with stones and with stocks. And yet, for all this, her treacherous sister Judah hath not returned unto me with her whole heart, but feignedly, saith the Lord. And the Lord said unto me, The backsliding Israel hath justified herself more than treacherous Judah. Go and proclaim these words toward the north, and say, Return, thou backsliding Israel, saith the Lord, and I will not cause mine anger to fall upon you. For I am merciful, saith the Lord, and I will not keep anger forever. Only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against the Lord thy God, and hast scattered thy way to the strangers under every green tree, and ye have not obeyed my voice, saith the Lord. Turn, O backsliding Israel, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you, and I will take you one of a city and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. And I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. And it shall come to pass, when ye be multiplied and increased in the land, in those days, saith the Lord, they shall say no more, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they visit it, neither shall that be done any more. At that time they shall call Jerusalem the throne of the Lord, and all nations shall be gathered unto it, to the name of the Lord, to Jerusalem. Neither shall they walk any more after the imagination of their heart. In those days the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel, and they shall come together out of the land of the north to the land that I have given for an inheritance unto your fathers. But I said, How shall I put thee among the children, and give thee a pleasant land, a goodly heritage of the hosts of nations? And I said, Thou shalt call me my father, and shalt not turn away from me. Surely, as a wife treacherously departeth from her husband, so have ye dealt treacherously with me, O house of Israel, saith the Lord. A voice was heard upon the high places, weeping and supplications of the children of Israel, for they have perverted their way, and they have forgotten the Lord their God. Return, ye backsliding children, and I will heal your backsliding. Behold, we come unto thee, for thou art the Lord our God. Truly in vain is salvation hoped for from the hills, and from the multitude of mountains. Truly in the Lord our God is the salvation of Israel. For shame hath devoured the labor of our fathers from our youth, the flocks and their herds, their sons and their daughters. We lie down in our shame, and our confusion covereth us. For we have sinned against the Lord our God, we and our fathers, from our youth even unto this day, and have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God. Okay, let's start out looking at these first 5 verses here. And here in verse 1, he uses this analogy of Israel as a wife and the law, which you can find in Deuteronomy chapter 24. And we'll just read first few verses of Deuteronomy 24. When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, and giveth it in her hand, and sendeth her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife, after that she is defiled. For that is abomination before the Lord. And thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. So that's what is being referred to here. And in that verse, it speaks of doing that is causing the land to sin. Here in Jeremiah 3, it speaks of causing the land to be polluted or defiled. And you see that in Leviticus chapter 18, speaks of the sins there of the Canaanites defiling the land. And if you do these things, the land will be defiled or polluted. And there's a couple of different words there in Hebrew that are both translated as polluted and defiled, and they're used in various places, and we don't need to get into that. But that idea of the sins they're committing, these things they're doing, such as this, putting away a wife, she goes to another man, then taking her back, is a thing that would cause the land to sin or pollute the land. So there's this connection to the land, and even that the Canaanites, the things that they did without God's law, was polluting the land, and that's why they're being cast out. So I think the idea of that polluting the land and causing then the land to spit you out, you find that in Leviticus 18, I believe, that the land is polluted and it will spew you out. But here this is being spoken of not of them doing this thing, but this analogy that God is the husband of Israel. And, even when a man does this, he can't take that woman back. So the question is, can God take them back? Let's see. So the idea being that there is this point of no return. And it's interesting that you find, and some of your translations may read differently. Does one of you guys have the ESV? Do you have that, James? Can you read what that verse says in the ESV, especially the end part of the verse?
Which verse?
Verse 1.
If a man divorces his wife and she goes from him and becomes another man's wife, will he return to her? Would not that land be greatly polluted? You have played the whore with many lovers. Would you return to me, declares the Lord?
See, that word's different. Like it's, would you return to me? Asking that question, where King James has, yet return to me, saith the Lord. So King James sounds like God's calling them to return in this verse. And some other translations, it's worded like, you think you can return to me after this? And the problem is that the Hebrew is ambiguous. It can go either way. But as you read the rest of the chapter, the context, the overall message at least clarifies, because God does keep saying to return, and yet here he's saying there's a point that is going to be too late. Just like when a woman has that bill of divorcement, she goes to another man. There's no coming back. So my understanding is God saying there's a point here that you don't get to come back as a nation, because again, it's clear that there will always be a remnant, and God's always calling those individuals to turn to Him. But as a nation, there's a point of no return. Then verse 2, lift up thine eyes unto the high places and see where thou hast not been lying with. Of course, the high places were the location of idol worship, and if you look back through the history of Israel and the high places, here I believe he's speaking of clearly the idol worship, but there was a problem that they also would worship God on these high places in a way that God did not desire, but sometimes he tolerated it. But here he's speaking very obviously of the adultery that they're committing with other gods. And of course, it's a metaphor in that sense, that unfaithfulness to God. They're married to God and they go to other gods. So there's this adultery metaphor, but a lot of the idol worship that went on did involve literal fornication. So the idea of it being pictured as sexual sin is not just that metaphor, not just that idea of them being unfaithful to God, but there actually does involve sexual sin. And again, the reference to that the land is polluted with thy whoredoms and with thy wickedness. And verse 3, because of these things, because of their unfaithfulness to God, therefore the showers have been withholden, and there hath been no latter rain. Has a whore's forehead and refuses to be ashamed. Let's take a look back at Leviticus. We could also look in Deuteronomy, but we'll look at Leviticus 26 and a few verses there. 26, we'll read 14 and 15 and skip around a few places. But if ye will not hearken unto me, and will not do all these commandments, and if ye shall despise my statutes, or if your soul abhor my judgment, so that ye will not do all my commandments, that ye break my covenant, and so then it goes on with the consequences if they don't follow God's commandments, if they break his covenants. We'll skip down to 18. And if you will not yet for all this, so these other punishments, hearken to me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins, and I will break the pride of your power, and I will make your heaven as iron, and your earth as brass. And your strength shall be spent in vain, for your land shall not yield her increase, neither shall the trees of the land yield their fruits. And you have a very similar in Deuteronomy. And here you see this consequence of God withholding the rain as a consequence for them breaking that covenant with him and refusing to follow his commandments. Then you see in 4 and 5 this idea of them calling out to God, and they're counting on his anger passing. It's going to be okay because he's merciful and he's not going to be angry forever. But in the end, they spoke, but behold, thou hast spoken and done evil things as thou couldst. They did all the evil that they could at every opportunity. Then verses 6 through 11. Go ahead and read those again since it's changing here. The Lord said also unto me in the days of Josiah the king, hast thou seen that which backsliding Israel hath done? She is gone up upon every high mountain, and under every green tree, and there hath played the harlot. And I said, after she had done all these things, turn thou unto me. But she returned not, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away, and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. And it came to pass, through the likeness of her whoredom, that she defiled the land, and committed adultery with stones and with stocks. And yet, for all this, her treacherous sister Judah hath not turned unto me with her whole heart, but feignedly, saith the Lord. And the Lord said unto me, the backsliding Israel hath justified herself more than treacherous Judah. So this, the Lord is saying this to him in the days of Josiah. And of course, we have Josiah as being a good king and one of the best in as far as turning his heart back to God and trying to follow God and trying to make the people to follow God. And let's go look at go to 2 Kings. We can go to 2 Chronicles, but let's just go to 2 Kings and just read just a couple, just a little bit here. Actually, I didn't write down what I wanted to read. I just wrote down chapters 22 and 23. So there was a part of it that I wanted to read, but I don't want to read that whole 2 chapters. Anyway, I was looking for the part, it's probably at the end. Okay, I'll read this part in 23, 25, but that's only part of what I was wanting. And like unto him was there no king before him that turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses. Neither after him arose there any like him. Notwithstanding, the Lord turned not from the fierceness of his great wrath, wherewith his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations that Manasseh had provoked him withal. And the Lord said, I will remove Judah also out of my sight, as I have removed Israel, and will cast off this city Jerusalem, which I have chosen, and the house of which I said, my name shall be there. And there's one place where it speaks of that the people followed the Lord all the days of Josiah. But this speaks, as we read, that they did not turn unto me with their whole heart, but feignedly. So the people's heart, people followed the Lord during Josiah's lifetime, but they did not turn their hearts to the Lord. It was not genuine. And here, of course, it speaks of backsliding Israel in these verses, starting there in verse 6. And it's speaking there of the northern kingdom. Now, there were places where in chapter 2 it's speaking of Israel as the whole, of what would have been the united kingdom, both Israel and Judah. But here it's speaking of Israel, and that's obvious because it says Judah saw what Israel did, and they did not learn from God putting away Israel, giving Israel that bill of divorce, and that, of course, symbolizes that finality of that judgment. There's no turning back from the judgment that's coming at that point. And Judah didn't learn from seeing what happened there, but then did the same thing. And in verse 9 speaks of the lightness of her whoredom. That idea of considering it a light thing, it just came easily. So a literal translation said wantonness there, but I think that lightness is the idea of just the ease with which Israel committed these things. And then again, that idea of defiling the land. And of course, the stones and stocks, idols that are made of stone and wood. Again, we mentioned there in verse 10 that Judah, although appeared to be following God during Josiah's reign, they did not turn with their whole heart, but feignedly or pretending. And I think it's 2 Chronicles, I have that written down here, 2 Chronicles 34, 33 might be what, well, we talked about it, so I don't need to go there, but I think that's the place where it said about people following the Lord during Josiah's reign. Okay.
I have that verse, if you want.
Yeah, you go ahead and read that.
2 Chronicles 34, 33. Josiah took away all abominations from all the territories that belonged to the people of Israel, and made all who were present in Israel serve the Lord their God. All his days they did not turn away from following the Lord, the God of their father.
So that's a very positive sounding verse, very encouraging verse. And then you read this one, and yet for all this her treacherous sister Judah hath not turned unto me with her whole heart, but feignedly. So, and this is in the days of Josiah, so you know that was not genuine on their part. And of course, what follows after Josiah's death demonstrates that as well. But they were following the Lord during the days of Josiah because of Josiah. It was not because their hearts had turned to God. And of course, we look at them and we see, comparing Israel and Judah, generally think of Israel as being much worse. But here God's saying Judah's actually worse than Israel. And a couple possible reasons for that. Judah is pretending to be true to God, but is not. Where at least apparently Israel was not pretending in what Israel was doing. So that's a possible reason for that. And also, and the reason the big thing that's mentioned is Judah had the opportunity to learn from Israel. She saw what Israel did. She saw what the consequence of that, and she didn't learn. Okay. Let's read verses 12 through 19. Go and proclaim these words toward the north, and say, Return, thou backsliding Israel, saith the Lord, and I will not cause mine anger to fall upon you. For I am merciful, saith the Lord, and I will not keep anger forever. Only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against the Lord thy God, and hast scattered thy ways to the strangers under every green tree, and ye have not obeyed my voice, saith the Lord. Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you, and I will take you, one of a city, and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. And I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. And it shall come to pass, when ye be multiplied and increased in the land, in those days, saith the Lord, they shall say no more, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they visit it, neither shall that be done any more. At that time they shall call Jerusalem the throne of the Lord, and all the nations shall be gathered unto it, to the name of the Lord, to Jerusalem. Neither shall they walk any more after the imagination of their evil heart. In those days the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel, and they shall come together out of the land of the north to the land that I have given for an inheritance unto your fathers. But I said, How shall I put thee among the children, and give thee a pleasant land, a goodly heritage of the host of the nations? And I said, Thou shalt call me my father, and shalt not turn away from me. So starting here in verse 12, we have words to the north, to the kingdom of Israel. So we have God's call for the backsliding Israel to return And you see in verse 13, the condition of acknowledging your iniquity, which is to confess. And of course, they didn't return at this time. They didn't heed this call at this time. And then verse 14, again, turn, O backsliding children. So you have confession and repentance here in these the conditions of turning to of being received by God. Then verse 14, we have this, for I am married unto you, in King James. And this is a really interesting one. Some translations, and I think, does the ESV have master there? I'll be your master, or I am your master, or something like that. It's a real interesting thing to look at this word. The word is Baal, and I don't know if I'm saying that right. It looks exactly the same as Baal, except for, if you look at the Hebrew word, there's another little spot or something over here on the one side. So the emphasis is different. The pronunciation's a little different, but it's almost the same word. And the literal meaning of it is to be master, or to have dominion. The name Baal or Baal of the Canaanite god means Lord or master. So you have this idea in this word of being master. There's places where it's translated have dominion, but most often thing is where this word is used is to be husband or to be married. And it is used even of the wife once. So it's not just used. So it's very much associated with marriage. In Genesis 20:3, it's used of a wife. So it's not, you have the idea of to be master, to have dominion, and that idea of a husband. It's also used of a wife. So the idea of marriage. So what is it saying here? Is it saying I'm married to you, or is it saying I'm your master? Looking at the context, my mind sees that idea of master as making more sense. And yet he's using this idea of being married to them and putting them away, which means that it's, once they're divorced and gone to another, he can't take them back, and yet he's calling them back. So it's like there's this, it's like it's contradictory, but it's not. The idea there is a final judgment coming, and yet God is still calling for that remnant, still calling for the individuals. I lean toward the master here. It makes sense in this because of the rejection of the nation. That idea of the marriage being broken makes more sense to me as married. But it's a difficult thing to figure out with that word, because like I said, if you look through, it's usually associated with marriage, but not always.
It kind of brings up like a recollection of the covenant that God had entered into with the nation of Israel.
Oh, yes.
The terminology kind of escapes me, but there was a name for that, vassal, some kind of vassal covenant, that indicated that he was sovereign over them, but he, that agreement to care for them, and that covenant was still, I don't know. I mean, the Israelites had surely not kept their end, but God was keeping his end.
Right.
And so it kind of brings up that covenant that he had made with them, and he was still their master.
Yep, that is. Yeah, all the idea of marriage, the idea of them breaking the covenant, even to, the rains being a consequence of breaking the covenant, all the different symbolism, and not just symbolism, but literal things as well, all kind of packed in here. did have a few places written down here where that word was used. In Deuteronomy 24:1, which we read, taken a wife and married her. The married is that same word, Baal. In 1 Chronicles 4:22, there's where that word is translated as had dominion. It's talking about, I think it's about a king over an area. So it's absolutely not talking about marriage in any sense, but it is married in most places. And of course, as we look at that, God is both in different places. Master, you could say, is literally, and he's also husband of his people in a figurative way. And then the idea, he's calling them to return back. Which verse is this? Oh, verse 14. He's calling them to return. Turn, O backsliding children, for I am married to you, or I'm your master. I will take you one of a city and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. So it's not this idea of returning as a whole. It's returning as a remnant. You're going to return one from a city, two from a family, and I'll bring you to Zion. In verse 15, I will give you pastors according to my heart. And I think most translations have that as shepherds. That's what pastor and shepherd are completely synonymous. And in verse 16, the Ark of the Covenant will become irrelevant. It will be forgotten, and it will never be remade or used or anything again. Of course, that points to a new covenant. That Ark had parts of their history. Of course, a pot of manna, Aaron's rod, irreplaceable. The Ten Commandments, but actually the ones that God wrote are in the Ark, and this is just forgotten. So that points to that new covenant that God makes with Israel. The Ark of the Covenant was a very significant thing, and now it's under the new covenant, it has no significance at all. Verse 17, Jerusalem will be called the throne of the Lord, and all the nations will be gathered into it. And so I'd like to read a couple passages in the New Testament, just in reference to these few verses that we've just read and the imagery that's there. Hebrews chapter 12, starting in 18. As we look at these verses about bringing them back, a few of them, bringing them to Zion, and that Jerusalem will be called the throne of the Lord. The nations are coming into it. For ye are not come unto the mount that might be touched and that burned with fire, nor unto blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, which voice they that heard entreated that the word should not be spoken to them anymore. So this mountain where those 10 commandments were given to them, which are in the Ark of the Covenant, that's going to be forgotten. You're not come unto that mount. But they could not endure that which was commanded, and if so much as a beast touch the mountain, it shall be stoned or thrust through with a dart. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, I exceedingly fear and quake. But ye are come unto Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaketh better things than that of Abel. See that ye refuse not him that speaketh. For if they escape not, who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall not we escape, if we return away from him that speaketh from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth, But now he hath promised, saying, Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, and those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Wherefore, we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace, whereby we may serve God acceptably, with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a consuming fire. And Revelation 21. We'll read verse 2. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And then verse 10. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. Okay, then verse 19. But I said, How shall I put thee among the children, and give thee a pleasant land, a goodly heritage of the hosts of nations? And I said, Thou shalt call me my Father, and shalt not turn away from me. And I can't help but go to Romans 8. Go back up to 14. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. And of course, Galatians as well, that says almost the same thing. Galatians 4:6. And because ye are sons, God hath sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So calling God Father, and that Abba is Aramaic for father, and then it would read in Greek, Pater, which is father. So calling God Father. And you see a big change in the New Testament with Jesus, always referring to God as Father, always addressing God as Father, teaching the disciples to pray, Our Father. That was not, there's references to God in the Old Testament as Father, but not like Jesus taught it. Okay. Verses 20 through 25. I'm not going to read it again just for time right here. But in 20, we have again the wife and husband. The house of Israel has dealt treacherously with God as a wife that's left her husband. And then verse 21, consequence of that, the voice heard on the high places, which is the places of idol worship, weeping and supplications of the children of Israel. They have perverted their way and forgotten the Lord their God. So the weeping is the result of this, of what they've done, of this way of life. And then still, after all this, all the finality, return, ye backsliding children, and I will heal your backsliding. And then you have this, then it changes. That would have to be the call of God, or the call of the prophet to them on behalf of God, return. But it's of God, because it's I will heal your backsliding. And then you have the response that God's longing for. Behold, we come unto thee, for thou art the Lord our God. And that's not the response that he got from them as a whole. But that's the response that he's looking for. And then 23, truly in vain is salvation hoped for from the hills and from the multitude of mountains. Truly in the Lord our God is the salvation of Israel. So that hope from the hills, the high places, and from, this says the multitude of the mountains, others say the tumult of the mountains. It's the stuff that's going on, I believe, on those high places. And this salvation, it's vanity to hope in that. following the idols, trusting in the idols is vanity. Only in the Lord our God is the salvation of Israel. So following the idols is vanity, and then into 24, it's not just vanity, it destroys your life and your livelihood. Shame hath devoured the labor of our fathers from our youth, their flocks and their herds, their sons and the daughters. So it's destroying their life and their livelihood. For we lie down in shame. You know, the ending, the last verse is tragic in the ending of it. We lie down in shame, and our confusion covereth us, for we have sinned against the Lord our God, we and our fathers, from our youth, even unto this day, and have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God. And of course, these, this isn't even the words of Israel to God, but, because they didn't respond like this. But this is an interesting thing, shame. And some, for shame hath devoured the labor of our fathers, and some versions have it the shameful thing, which would be, I think that's probably more correct. But the word there, shame, or the shameful thing, is bosheth. And that is a word, and it means shame. That's literally what it means, but it came to refer to Baal. And if you look in 2 Samuel 2:8, you see the name of Saul's son, Ishbosheth. If you look in 1 Chronicles 8:33, you see the son of Saul, same man. It gives his name as Eshbaal. So this name, Eshbaal, was also rendered Eshbosheth. So the name of Baal, the false god, was also interchanged with the word shame. So the word Eshbaal would be man of Baal, or Ishbosheth would be man of shame. And you see that also with Jonathan's son, Meribal in one place, and Mephibosheth in another. So here we have shame being spoken of. Shame has devoured their labor, their livelihood. We lie down in shame. Of course, it's speaking of literal shame, but anybody who read that at that time would know that that also speaks of Baal. And of course, the ending of the chapter ends in despair. So throughout, you have God's putting them away. It's final, but still that call to turn back. It's too late for the nation. They're going to go into captivity, but God still wants the hearts of each of the people, and there will be that time of a new covenant. There will be a remnant of Israel, and there will be the remnants from the nations will come and be in that new covenant and be God's people and be faithful to him. And of course, we see as the imagery in Revelation that is there also the bride of Christ. So that is all that I have.